All right, welcome to the Week 7 wrap-up with yours truly, Richard Dragon, feeling slightly under the weather. I don't know if you can hear it with my instrument, but I just said instrument. I got a bit of a sinus infection going on, so I do apologize for the timely fashion or the lack of timely fashion in the release of this wrap-up, but I do want to welcome you to the Week 7 wrap-up. I did do it here. We're going to start off heading out to New York City, and the Niners suck, taking on Best on Paper. First off, we can't even start talking about this matchup without acknowledging Ryan Tannehill. Unfucking believable. Guy threw for 282 yards and 4 touchdowns for a total of 50.5 fantasy points. Now, 50.5 fantasy points is a lot of points by a single earner, regardless of it being your quarterback. Nonetheless, Best on Paper, congratulations. Arian Foster, also no slouch, with 59 yards and 1 touchdown. However, he tore his Achilles, so he's out for the rest of the season. Sorry, buddy. As for Niners suck, when will you take my advice about Eli fucking Manning, Jim? Jesus. He threw for 170 yards, no touchdowns, and thankfully no picks. Your only double-digit earner on your entire roster was Chris Ivory with 41 yards rushing, but he was playing against Oakland. So, or I should say rather, he'll be playing against Oakland next week. So you'll probably be okay if you start up again. Based on Ryan Tannehill alone, I'm awarding Danny the Best on Paper with Lady Luck. On the flip side, with only 60.5 fantasy points, that's right, that's you, Jim Chaney, and a great showing, not by Eli Manning, Jim Chaney and the Niners suck are taking home shittiest team of the week. And, of course, lonely at the bottom because they are holding on to the number 10 standing in the PPFL. Best on Paper declares a victory, 131 fantasy points versus 60.5. All right, let's switch gears. We're going to take a look at the Knights Templar versus Fear of a Dwarf Planet. With Miami's monster game, the Knights were about to earn some solid fantasy points with Lamar Miller and his 175 yards rushing, 1 touchdown, total of 47.6 fantasy points. The rest of the roster, including Drew Brees, Norman, looked pretty limp. I'm sure you can agree, right? But we'll get back to Norman, okay? Because I've got something I want to point out about him, okay? Let's focus on Dan O for a second, all right? Marshawn Lynch threw for some good numbers for the Dwarfs. 122 yards, 1 touchdown, and 23.2 fantasy points. Nice job. And how about the Colts' Ty Hilton? That's 150 yards receiving and 2 touchdowns for 36 fantasy points. That's the kind of game that any fantasy owner likes to see. I think we can all agree upon that, right? The upsetting fact about this matchup for me is the Knights. That's you, Norman. Not keeping track of your roster. With no defense started, the Knights sealed their fate. In fact, had Norman started the Seahawks defense, which he had on the bench, by the way, he would have taken down the Dwarfs. For that reason alone, I'm awarding the If Only trophy to the Knights Templar. I'm also awarding Close But No Cigar to the Knights because you only had a 4.4 fantasy deficit, keeping you from being the winner of this matchup. Because your defense, dude. Oh, man. The Dwarfs take down the win, 111.4 versus 107.1. How about we take a look at the duel of father versus son? That's the Antelope Postman versus the Bears. Yeah, okay. Brady had a good game, okay? Fuck that guy and his underinflated balls. Danny Woodhead also put up some good numbers for the Bears. 26 yards rushing, which I guess isn't great numbers, but that's 22.1 fantasy points. So who can get down on that, right? But Pops did not take the advice of this commentator after last week's wrap-up. The Bears lack depth, girth, and size. Yeah, Pops, you're really coming up short. Even with a bye-week replacement, the Postman looked good with Carson Palmer starting. Overall, it was a good game for the Cardinals with Chris Johnson. Also starting for the Postman, rushing 122 yards and 1 touchdown for 23.2 fantasy points. Devonta Freeman also continued his streak, his three-game streak, with over 100 yards rushing without a touchdown. Still a solid performance, 18 fantasy points for Pedro this week. And that start. I'm awarding the Golden Dick Trophy to Pedro and the Antelope Postman for showing no mercy to your feeble father. That's That's right. The guy is practically a senior citizen, and you bent him right over, and you broke his ass wide open. Of course, you maintain your nearly perfect record of 6-1. Your nearly perfect record, by the way. It's a little bit salt in the wound right there. And your number one spot in the PPFL, so you're going to keep that your number one trophy, my friend. The Postman deliver the win. Deliver the win. This week, 142.7 versus 94.6. All right, time to take a look at my matchup. This is the Dorks Awaken versus the Swine Smokers. Now, at one point, it looked like the Dorks were going to get lucky with luck. Even with 2 picks, he still threw for 333 yards and 3 touchdowns for his best fantasy game of the season. Luck aside, there were no real standouts for the Dorks. I think you could agree with me, right, Jason? With a lot of his team on a bye week, in fact. The Smokers did all right, though. I guess Matt Ryan he did all right. He threw the ball. If he could just throw the ball to his own goddamn team, things would be a lot better. I'll tell you what, I'm riding a bit of an emotional roller coaster with Matt Ryan. However, Mark Ingram, he picked up some of the slack with the Smokers and 143 yards rushing, 1 touchdown, and 25.8 fantasy points. Doug Burton also helped pick up the slack with the Smokers with 136 yards and rushing for 22.1 fantasy points. All in all, this really wasn't that exciting of a matchup. Honestly, I mean, I could say it's even my matchup, but I didn't think it was exciting. Smokers smoked out the win for you, little Paul. 119 versus 107.3. All right, last but definitely not least, we're going to take a look at the PC Police. That was Big P versus the Orange County Ass Star. Okay, let's pause real quick here for just a brief intermission while we think about this matchup.
I can't explain. Even the news lie. Well, you're driving me insane. Well, I know I just need one more chance to prove my love to you.
Oh, little P.
If you go back to me, and I'll guarantee I'll never let you go.
All right, sorry, buddy. That intermission was brought to you by Little P before his balls had dropped. Okay, back to fantasy. How about Phillip Rivers? I was actually shocked Little P started Rivers since he was up against the Raiders. Rivers threw for 336 yards and 3 touchdowns. Even with 2 picks, he still earned 34.4 fantasy points. All right, of course, we got Adrian Peterson also put up some double digits. I want to point him out as well. And Amari Cooper was also a standout for Little P with 133 yards receiving and 1 touchdown and 26.3 fantasy points. As for Big P, even with a shitty game by Sam Bradford, Le'Veon Bell rushed for 121 yards, 18.7 fantasy points, and Todd Gurley, I bet that guy got his ass kicked when he was young, right? Rushed for 128 yards and 2 touchdowns for 33.3 yards, or 33.3 fantasy points. Sorry about that, folks. And of course, the Gronk had a great game, 108 yards receiving and 1 touchdown for 21.8 fantasy points. That's really no surprise, right? Should be classified with Tom Brady, right? Therefore, even with all that smack talking, Little P, it wasn't enough, buddy. Therefore, Little P, I am giving you Humiliation Sucks. That trophy, since it pretty much lost to your older brother. I mean, that kind of sucks. You're playing against Big P, who's kind of like a brother to you, and then, of course, me, your brother. So you got double ass whooped. And plus, you were singing Bended Knee during the write-up, so I think that's worth Humiliation Sucks, right? All right, let's take a look at the standings for the PPFL. Some really interesting stuff going on here. In fact, Little P was dislodged from his spot. He is now in the number 4th spot in the PPFL. Up 1 notch, the PC Police, number 3 in the PPFL. Number 2, the Swine Smokers. And number 1, still holding the lead at the 6-1 record, the Antelope Postman. Hey, guys, have a wonderful week. Take care. We'll see you for the Week 8 wrap-up.